What's your "that's why I don't go home for the holidays" story? It used to be a tradition that my mother, sister, and I would load up and head to my grandparents' house, along with my uncle and his family. Once I became an adult, I managed to get out of most of those visits because, to be blunt, my grandparents were a-holes. My grandmother is a delusional, manipulative narcissist who spent my entire childhood telling me that no one would ever love me if I didn't lose weight. When I developed an eating disorder as a teenager, she applauded me for it and encouraged me to use my new body to my advantage. She even told me I should learn how to pole dance because those women were so empowered. I was 15. She constantly tried to pit me against my mother because my mom stopped taking her BS years ago, and my grandmother couldn't stand that her daughter didn't worship her. She also tried to turn my sister against both of us, since my sister was younger and easier to manipulate. My grandmother always has to have her way, no matter how unreasonable, inconvenient, or hurtful it is for everyone else. If you disagree with her, it's because you don't love her enough. And she never missed a chance to point out anything she considered a flaw, a zit, a few extra pounds, my outfit, makeup, or lack of it, even my earrings. My grandfather could be an a-hole once in a while too, but he was usually quieter about it. I remember wearing a knee-length skirt with navy blue pantyhose once, and he told me I looked like a streetwalker. Overall, he was mostly okay to me though. When he said something rude, it was always in this matter-of-fact way, like he genuinely didn't realize it was rude. If he pointed out a blemish on my face, it was usually followed by some old-fashioned remedy for how to fix it. My grandmother, on the other hand, is nasty on purpose. She says things with the intent to hurt. Big difference. And then there's my uncle. A huge a-hole, no qualifiers needed. He's loud, rude, and says the most god-awful racist things. I actually have another uncle who's kind and decent, but he cut ties with the family years ago after they threw a fit when he married a black woman. So you can imagine the kind of vile stuff my loud, nasty uncle says around the dinner table. I always dreaded it. Every single year. Oh, and did I mention that the meal was served at 11 a.m. sharp? If you were late, everyone just started without you, because that's when my grandma liked to eat, and screw everyone else. Luckily, I don't have to come up with excuses anymore. After an absolute crap storm a few years ago, my mother and I cut all contact with my grandmother and that uncle. My grandfather has since passed away, which is actually a big part of the story. He had Alzheimer's, and my grandmother handled it in all the worst ways imaginable, including calling my mom to say she was going to hurt him, and then herself, and getting furious when my mom called social services. It's a long, twisted mess that also involved my grandmother forcing my mom to move out of her own house so she and my grandfather could live there, only for her to treat my mom like garbage afterward. So yeah, I don't really do anything for the holidays anymore. Story 2. The last time I went home for Thanksgiving, I hadn't planned on it. But my mom begged and begged because my older brother, who lives abroad, was coming home for the first time in a couple of years. Leading up to it, she'd been increasingly abusive. I was already struggling to handle her constant yelling over the phone and all the passive-aggressive comments, but she promised she'd cook a nice meal, that we'd have a lovely day together as a family. She even said she'd make up the guest room for me. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. We settled on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, at her request, because she already had dinner plans on the actual holiday. That detail ends up being important. When my partner and I got to her house, I should have known what we were walking into. My mom was in full, hyper-stressed, lashing-out mode, frantically cleaning, slamming things, furious for no apparent reason. She wouldn't look at me or speak to me and was short-tempered with my partner. There was no dinner. She snapped that since we'd spent Thanksgiving Day with my partner's family, there was no point in her cooking a meal. She refused to acknowledge me at all until my brother and his family arrived, at which point she halfway pretended everything was fine, while still icing me out, and ordered pizza for Thanksgiving. By the end of the night, I was too upset and confused by her behavior to feel comfortable staying over as planned, so we told her we were going to head home. That, of course, made everything worse. 2 days later, she called me, screaming so loudly that my partner could hear her from another room. She told me I'd ruined Thanksgiving and the only chance she'd had to spend time with my brother's family. She said I'd clearly chosen my partner's family over hers, that she'd always known I would do that eventually. She brought up my ex, claiming I'd done the same thing with his family, and went on about how she couldn't compete with real families, that I was always running to anyone but her. Then came the familiar line, that she was tired of walking on eggshells around me, that if I had a problem with the way she talks to me, I needed to get over myself and my stupid feelings. And on it went. She ranted for almost 2 hours, not even close to a record for her, but it had been a while since she'd screamed at me for that long. I sat there quietly crying, saying nothing, because there's nothing anyone can say to stop her once she gets like that. The call finally ended with her saying she didn't want to talk to me for a while, and that I should just leave her alone. She didn't speak to me for almost a year, not until my dad died. They'd been divorced and long estranged. As soon as he passed, she started calling me every day, keeping me on the phone for 2-hour conversations that made me late for work. Every call became about her grief, her struggles, her pain, with plenty of thinly veiled verbal abuse directed my way in between. Eventually, I asked her, far more politely than she deserved, if she could please stop calling me in the mornings because talking about my dad right before work was too upsetting. She got angry. That was the last real conversation we ever had. It's been over 2 years now. She still sends hateful letters sometimes and has essentially disowned me. But that's the extent of our contact. I don't think I'm ever going to go home for a holiday again. Story 3. I went home last Christmas. I finished work at 8:30 at night, then drove the 8-hour trip through the night to get there. I was only staying for a few days, and this was right in the middle of a family argument. I saw my immediate family first, then went to visit my grandmother. That night, I got a nasty text from my aunt, the one currently feuding with the rest of the family, saying she was furious I hadn't seen her, and that I was rude, disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. The kicker? She works 100 meters from my mom's place. I didn't even know where she lived, and she never once tried to contact me. Now, when I go back, I only tell the people I actually want to see. The last time I visited my grandmother, I was blissfully drunk and barely remember it. This year, I'm working Christmas Day and happily taking that sweet 2.25 times pay. Oh, and favoritism? Huge issue in my family. I always get the short end of the stick, while my cousins are spoiled with whatever they want. What hurts most is watching my sister get disappointed year after year. I just can't stand the unfairness anymore. Story 4. Our first daughter had just turned 1 shortly before Christmas of 1995. At the time, my in-laws lived about a 2-hour drive away. My mother-in-law asked if we'd be staying over on Christmas Eve, and we said, no, it's a bit difficult with a baby. We'll drive out to join you on Christmas Day. She wasn't thrilled, but agreed, saying, fine, but you have to be here by 10 a.m. That's when we'll be opening presents. So, on Christmas morning, we got up bright and early, gulped down breakfast, got the baby ready, and hit the road by 6:30. The drive was slow because of snow and ice, but we still managed to pull into their driveway at 9:50. We grinned at each other, relieved. We'd made it on time. Then we walked into the house and froze. Torn wrapping paper was everywhere. They had already opened all their presents without us. My husband isn't one for confrontation, but he couldn't hold back this time. He cornered his mother in the kitchen and said angrily, "Why didn't you wait for us? We got here on time." She smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, the kids didn't want to wait." The kids she was referring to were my husband's younger sister and brother, ages 26 and 21 at the time. To this day, I'm convinced she chose not to wait as a way of punishing us for not staying overnight on Christmas Eve. Whatever her reason, that moment made it clear how much or how little we mattered to her. After a couple more experiences like that, we finally put our collective feet down and started celebrating Christmas Day in our own home. Edited to add, after we'd been doing our own Christmas for a few years, my mother-in-law called on Christmas Day and berated my husband, calling him a bad son who had turned his back on his family. She made him cry. I'll never forgive her for that. Story 5. My brother-in-law and his wife are both narcissists. I'll call them J and K. J and K live with my mother and father-in-law and treat them like servants. They tell their friends they're living at home to help the in-laws with their underwater mortgage, but in reality, they just drain them financially and use them for childcare. My mother-in-law absolutely refuses to address any of it and allows them to walk all over her and my father-in-law. She gets upset whenever I confront J and K, which basically forces me to tolerate their behavior. Eventually, we moved far away from the family. One Christmas, while we were visiting, J and K left very early in the morning to see her parents. My mother-in-law refused to let anyone open presents until everyone was back. My 7 and 9-year-old kids had to wait until around 3 o'clock in the afternoon because those two kept saying, "Okay, we're leaving in 15," all day long. I finally lost it and called them out. Everyone got mad at me, which was fine. I know when I'm being a jerk. The next Christmas, they invited us over again, and I said, "That's fine, but we're opening presents when we wake up, no matter who decides to sleep in or visit other family members." They tried to pull the exact same thing. So we left and went to my parents' house instead. Told them to call us when J and K got back. 0 out of 5. We'll never spend Christmas there again. Story 6. My uncle invites us to Thanksgiving every single year, but we never go. And for one very specific reason, he's a Jehovah's Witness. Now, I'm not saying all Jehovah's Witnesses are terrible people, but my uncle in particular absolutely is. One year, we actually went to his place for Thanksgiving. He handed out religious pamphlets to everyone at the table and spent the entire time talking about how the end of days was coming soon, warning that we all needed to repent or we'd burn in hell. It was a miserable 5 or 6 hours. Fast forward 2 years, and my dad, my uncle's own brother, was on his deathbed. His kidneys were shutting down, and the doctors said he had about a week left. My uncle had the frigging audacity to call my dying father just to tell him, "If you don't repent your sins, you're going to burn in hell." He didn't call to say goodbye. He didn't call to offer comfort or support to our grieving family. He called to tell his dying brother that he was going to hell. That pissed my mom off so much that she immediately called him back and screamed at him. The last thing my dad needed in his final days was his brother preaching damnation over the phone. Frigging unbelievable. Story 7. My parents divorced and both remarried different people. I'm the oldest of 8 kids now, and I'm only 21. Every time I visit, I get shamed with comments like, "Why didn't you come to your stepbrother's game?" Or, "Why didn't you go to your stepsister's dance recital?" I'm never told about these events. Apparently, I'm just supposed to know when they happen. Not that I'd go anyway, even if I could memorize all those dates. Then come the questions about why I'm not back in school, even though I've explained several times why I'm not enrolled right now. No matter how many times I say it, it's like no one listens. My dad and stepmom argue constantly, usually because she's not getting her way and he ends up caving, which drives me crazy. Somehow, I always get pulled into the middle of it. She blames her bad mood on me and my brother, saying it's our fault because we never talk to her or don't help around the house. My stepmom has verbally abused me since I was 8 years old, and she's even tried to hit me a few times, but I always managed to block her. She's always treated my biological brother and me horribly. We never got TVs in our rooms, had to pay for our own phones, make our own food, do our own laundry, and were constantly grounded for made-up reasons. All of this happened before I even turned 18. When my dad was home on the weekends, things seemed normal. But once Monday came and he left for work in another state, it went right back to 5 days of hell. To this day, there isn't a single relative, friend, or parent who's ever gotten along with my stepmom. She acts like she's better than everyone else, and it's turned her into a cruel, condescending person. Story 8. For some reason, my brother and his wife are very unfriendly toward me, our extended family, and even my parents. For example, my parents once drove 8 hours to visit them, only to spend the entire weekend sitting in their hotel room because he either wouldn't make plans or would cancel at the last minute. This is especially hurtful considering my parents supported him financially well into his 30s. At every family gathering, it's the same story. My parents go out of their way to accommodate my brother, and he either blows them off or shows up briefly and acts unpleasant the whole time. On top of that, I have an aunt who constantly finds ways to attack me whenever she can. Honestly, I think my family struggles with a lot of emotional and mental issues. Story 9. My mother was a narcissist. She remarried when I was about 10, and from that point on, her new husband became her entire world. She had always been abusive, but it was mostly emotional and mental. After seeing that her new husband fully supported her behavior, he began to participate, and eventually escalated it to physical abuse. My mother followed his lead. When I was 11, his 3 sons came to stay with us over Christmas break. They were showered with gifts, while I received nothing. The explanation was that I wasn't a good child like his boys. The oldest, who was around 12, felt sorry for me and gave me one of his presents, an RC car. When I was caught playing with it, they took it away. The oldest tried to explain that he had given it to me as a gift, but my stepfather only gave him a light scolding before dragging me outside. He then made me stand there and watch as he ran over the RC car with his truck. That night, I had to sleep on the cold cement basement floor, my punishment for taking gifts from his children. I've never celebrated Christmas since. The whole holiday season leaves me emotionally wrecked, haunted by bitter flashbacks of how I grew up. Story 10. My parents are hoarders, so while I still see them, I refuse to be in their house for more than a minute or two. I've tried helping them, but my parents have issues that go far beyond hoarding. My mom is the main hoarder, but my dad enables her completely and continues to live in those conditions without complaint. They've both been emotionally and financially manipulative in the past, which makes me cautious about how much help or financial support I'm willing to offer. The irony is that my mom is a mental health professional. She knows exactly how to game the system and present herself as perfectly stable, while I end up looking like the bitter, ungrateful child. My dad has his own set of demons. He blames everyone and everything for his problems, and has become very childlike in how he handles things. It's nearly impossible to reason with him. I've tried to take legal steps to help. At one point, I even tried to become his sole guardian. But both of my parents were ultimately deemed competent adults. So, for now, it's a dead end. I'm 31 now, and the hoarding started when I was around 16 or 17, after my dad was deployed, and my brother and I had both left for college. Growing up, our house was messy and cluttered, but nothing close to what it's become, the kind of situation you'd see on those hoarding TV shows. Over the years, it has only gotten worse. I first realized how bad things were when I was about 18, or 19, and I began avoiding home altogether. Around 22 or 23, I went low or no contact for a few years because of financial disputes. Between 26 and 29, I made a big effort to help. I obtained power of attorney, convinced my mother to grant me sole guardianship of my father, and planned to get their finances in order. A couple of weeks before we were going to make it official, which would have involved me leaving my job to care for my dad, my mom backed out and went into a spiral of accusations. From 29 until now, I've returned to very limited or no contact. Nothing I say or do makes any difference. They don't listen. They refuse help. And they expect me to ignore their issues and play along with the illusion of a happy family. Meanwhile, they continue living in conditions and patterns I simply can't condone. It's been a long, painful process accepting that I may never have a normal relationship with my parents. I'm still open to helping them, but at this point, I need to see real change from their side before I put everything on the line again. I don't think our relationship could survive another round of manipulation. Story 11. Most of my immediate family is gone. My father is still trying to recover from the damage he did to his life with drugs and alcohol after his parents passed away in 2005. He's in his 50s now, living well below the poverty line. We haven't spoken in 5 months, though the longest we've gone without contact was 4 years. My mother, stepfather, and all my grandparents have passed away. Instead, my friend, the one who took me in when I was on the verge of homelessness, and his family have welcomed me into their home for the holidays for the past 3 or 4 years. I'll always be grateful for that. Edit. Since a few people have seen this, I'll add some background. I'm 23 years old, and I have a younger brother who's 20. I was 19, and he was 16, when our mother, who had cancer and kidney disease, and his father, my stepfather, passed away. My stepdad had just started eating right and exercising the year before, then suddenly died of a heart attack. He's in the Army Reserves and works in a factory, while I work at a restaurant in a state park. We're both trying to pay off and hold on to the house our parents were in the process of buying before they died. All of our grandparents are gone, all of mine, and all but one of his. His grandfather, who's about 75, is honestly not a good person. He only showed up to my stepdad's funeral to brag about his young wife and big truck. When I was about to become homeless, his aunt refused to let me move back in. And since he was still a minor at the time, there wasn't much he could do. But once he turned 18, he kicked her out and had me move back in. Story 12. My stepdad has major anger issues, and my mom is the classic enabler type. Oh, that's just how he is. You know how to avoid setting him off. Every single Christmas, literally, not figuratively, he causes a fight. I've learned to just find it funny now. Since I don't depend on them at all anymore, I just laugh at his 5-year-old tantrums and leave if he starts getting worked up. His outbursts are usually over something ridiculous. Someone wrapping presents the wrong way, or opening gifts out of order. Yes, that was actually the cause of one meltdown. His tantrums include throwing things, breaking stuff, slamming doors, peeling out of the driveway, and veins popping out of his forehead. It was terrifying to watch when I was 10, but now it's honestly just comical. He's in his late 50s now, and nothing's changed. Story 13. Mine's on the milder side compared to other stories, but I dread family events simply because I'm in my 30s and still unmarried with no children. I'm in a committed relationship. We own a house, both have excellent credit, hold 2 degrees, and have amazing careers. My boyfriend and I love traveling, going to events, and just enjoying our time together. Kids are on the docket eventually, but we're not in a hurry. To my family, though, none of that matters. No babies means I'm wasting my life, letting the womb cobwebs take over. They ask when I'm going to grow up, stop spending money on cosplay and Comic-Con, and start popping out mini versions of myself. Honestly, I'm the only woman over the age of 19 without kids. About a year ago, my aunt pulled me aside and told me I'm an inspiration to her teenage daughters. She said she uses my life as an example of what they can achieve if they work hard and act responsibly. She even quietly admitted that her oldest is sexually active, and that I'm an example of someone in an adult relationship who handles birth control responsibly. I cried and thanked her for appreciating my life instead of pointing out everything I'm supposedly doing wrong. Story 14. My wife and her parents have been clashing for years. They're extremely controlling and constantly use passive-aggressive tactics that have pushed her away. They've even tried to sabotage her relationships with other family members, including her dying grandparents. It's been really hard on her, but over time she started setting boundaries and eventually cut them out of her life. She hasn't seen or spoken to them much in several years. Her mom would get upset and send cruel messages like, "You're not my daughter anymore. Don't you dare even think about getting me anything for Mother's Day. I'm not your mother anymore." Then her dad would follow up with a lecture about how ungrateful she was for not even saying, "Happy Mother's Day." It's all just petty, toxic nonsense. My wife hasn't gone home for the holidays in quite a few years. Her dad still texts her occasionally, saying things like, "I sent you a package. Let me know when you get it." This time, she thought that maybe after all these years, they were finally ready to start making amends. She hoped it might be a letter, something meaningful to begin the healing process. But no, it was just some gift cards. My wife thanked him for the gift, but told him she wouldn't be coming home for the holidays. That's when he threw a tantrum, insisting she send back the gift cards and calling her an awful daughter. My wife sent them back, but she was heartbroken. The worst part is that her dad still texts her with meaningless small talk. Things like, "How about that football game?" or "Damn those Yankees." She ignores him, but he's not above using anything to try and guilt her into responding. The latest example was after that truck attack in New York City a few weeks back. He sent some heartfelt message saying, "Days like today, it would be nice to hear from you." Yet, he still refuses to take any real responsibility or make an effort to mend the relationship. It's a shame. If this continues, they may never get to meet their grandchild or rebuild any sort of connection with their daughter. As for me, I prefer to keep things low-key for the holidays. Negative forces just aren't worth letting into your life. Story 15. The last time I saw my dad, he tried to kill me. He and my stepmom had taken out life insurance policies on both my stepsister and me. That year, I went to their house for Easter. While we were eating, my dad went outside and started messing with my car, a 300ZX. He loosened the fuel lines and even removed the engine cover, leaving bare metal under the hood. I caught him out there with the hood up when I stepped out for a smoke. He brushed it off, saying he was just looking around. A few weeks later, while I was driving, the fuel lines popped off. The car suddenly died, thankfully. And when I jumped out and opened the hood, I saw fuel sprayed everywhere. I called my dad to ask what to do, and he told me to bring the car to his house, which was about 30 miles away. Instead, I had it towed to my mechanic. They told me it looked like the hose clamps had been intentionally loosened. I knew no one else had ever been under that hood. I never went back after that. For context, it was a Z32 VG30DE, a high-pressure fuel system in a tight, powerful engine. My mechanic figured my dad must have loosened the hose clamps just 1 or 2 turns, enough that they'd eventually pop off once things got hot. Later, my stepsister told me about the life insurance policies, and that's when everything clicked. When it first happened, I called my dad right away for help and ended up taking the car to my shop anyway. They told me the damage looked intentional, and I thought it might have been my girlfriend's baby's father since he was a mechanic. We're not together anymore. After a few days of thinking about it, I realized there was no way someone could have gotten into my car and done that without a key. I also realized he wouldn't have done it because his 5-year-old was often in my car. So I thought about who had been under my hood and concluded it was only my dad, myself, and my mechanic. Then I started wondering why he would have done it and called my stepsister to ask about a life insurance policy. She confirmed there was one for both of us. I called the police and showed them pictures of the engine. At the time, I lived in a town where the police were known for blaming victims. They said there wasn't any proof since I didn't have evidence showing him unscrewing the hose clamps. All I had was my stepsister confirming the new life insurance policy and pictures of a wet engine with several fuel lines missing hose clamps. Story 16. Last Christmas, I went over to my family's house alone and left my boyfriend at home since he had plans with his own family. My family has never liked him and always makes a point of bad-mouthing him whenever he's not around. I'd been staying there for 3 days, and around 9 o'clock on Christmas night, my boyfriend texted me to say he had left his family's house. I asked why, and it turned out his totally reformed alcoholic mother was drunk and selling her pills to a cousin. When he caught her, she said, "Well, where do you think your Christmas money came from?" He gave the money back and left. He was in tears. His mom had just let him down again, and now he was spending Christmas alone. I told my family I was going to leave and go spend time with him. They immediately lost it, asking why he couldn't just come over since there's a family here he can be with. I told them, because he's not friggin' stupid. He knows you don't like him. That set off a whole argument about how I shouldn't have told him that, and it ended with my mom calling him a coward for not wanting to be alone on Christmas. I really don't want to go back this year, especially after some other things I've learned about my parents, but I have a feeling they'll guilt me into it. My boyfriend, though, definitely won't be going back to his family for Christmas. Story 17. I only still go home to see my grandparents, who I'm very close with. Honestly, I never thought they'd live into my early 20s, but once they pass, I'm cutting all ties. My family is full of abusive pieces of crap, but the final straw came when I had to send my beloved cat to stay with my dad temporarily. I needed emergency housing after my boyfriend and I broke up, and the apartment I moved into had a cat that was, understatedly, aggressive. A couple of months later, after constantly asking my dad for pictures and updates and getting nothing, I found out he had given my cat away without telling me, just a few weeks after taking him in. I had trusted him, thinking my cat would be happier in a big house and safe from the other cat. My dad had never been abusive toward animals, so I never imagined he'd just dump him off with strangers. Now I can't find him, and it breaks my heart. Story 18. Not me, but my husband's family. The first Christmas wasn't too bad, just the usual weirdness. His great-grandma said pop music was the devil's work, and his grandfather spent a good hour trying to convince me that Obama's wife was a man. Otherwise, it was fine. I drank and made the best of it. Since then, though, a lot has happened to completely implode the family. It started with the death of my husband's sister and his mother's descent into alcoholic rages. Then, his uncle's son died from a traumatic brain injury at 1-year-old, and it's still debated whether the mother caused it on purpose, shaken baby syndrome. Because the family suspects her and another cousin had to watch her other children for over 6 months during the investigation, tensions exploded. The mother didn't like how the cousin was raising the kids, and now that entire side of the family can barely be in the same room without frothing at the mouth. Then it came out that another uncle had been having an affair for 8 years and has an illegitimate son. He and his wife are apparently still together, but the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. And then there's his cousin. She seemed to have a lovely family, 2 adorable kids and a hard-working husband, until her husband slept with her mom. Somehow, they're still together, but I can't imagine you ever really get over your husband sleeping with your mother. All in all, it makes for a spectacularly tense Christmas, and I'm not touching that with a 20-foot pole. Story 19. My mother-in-law gets so stressed out by Christmas preparations. Everything has to be absolutely perfect and exactly according to family tradition, of course, that a few years ago she ended up in the ER with atrial fibrillation. Christmas dinner that year was Subway and Jack in the Box because, naturally, no one could agree, eaten around a hospital bed. Since then, my wife and I have figured out that if we completely skip Christmas Day and visit a month early or late just to see them, she doesn't get nearly as anxious. Because it's not technically Christmas, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can just have dinner like normal people, next to an out-of-season tree that happens to still be up with a pile of presents underneath. So, we stopped going home for the holidays to keep my mother-in-law alive. Story 20. I've been living out of home for about a year now, and just last week I took a week off work to go back home. None of my friends or family really made an effort to see me, which hurt quite a bit since I'd been really looking forward to catching up and spending time with everyone. I ended up just hanging around the house most of the time. At least the family pets were excited to see me. That was something, at least. So yeah, now I don't really have any desire to go back for a visit. Last week really put me off. Edit. I'm in Australia, so we don't do Thanksgiving. My friends and I always keep in touch through a group chat, and they'd known for months that I was coming. They even seemed pretty excited at first, but I was the only one who actually tried to make plans. Everything either fell through or they just didn't respond. Story 21. Last Thanksgiving, my mom told the entire family, while I was in another room, that she was depressed and felt like a terrible mother because of me. Basically, she said I had ruined her as a person. I've been struggling with mental health issues for a long time, and my family isn't very understanding. It's usually my parents, my two sisters, and their significant others, which makes me the seventh wheel. For most of the holiday, I just get ignored, talked over, or snapped at. Honestly, the holidays just make me feel awful. But unfortunately, I still have to go. For context, I live at home, and I'm not in a financial position to move out yet. My significant other invited me to their house for Thanksgiving, but my mom threw a fit about it, so I stay to keep the peace, because when I try to make other plans, they get upset, and things only get worse. It's a fun situation. Story 22. I'm going, but I really wish I weren't. I live about an hour's drive from my hometown, where my mom, brothers, and in-laws all live. This year, my mother-in-law will be in California visiting my sister-in-law for Thanksgiving, and my father-in-law will be volunteering, feeding the poor and homeless. My older brother's 2 adult children both got married this year, and they're spending the holiday with their new spouses' families. My brother and his wife are going to her brother's place. My mom asked if the Saturday after Thanksgiving would work for everyone to get together, since 2 of my 3 kids will be working retail from Thursday evening onward. After a bit of juggling, we finally arranged for my crew to drive down on Thursday to spend the day with my mom and my disabled younger brother. My older brother and his family will go on Saturday. I got an email from my mom yesterday about Christmas. Everything had already been arranged for everyone to come to her house the Sunday before Christmas for dinner. My kids had even arranged to take that day off work. Now, my brother is going out of town with his kids and won't be back in time, so the gathering has been moved to December 9th. That means my kids have to go back to their bosses and ask for a completely different day off. I'm going to tell my mom that she needs to put her foot down and make it clear. Thanksgiving next year will be at her house on Thanksgiving Day, and the Christmas gathering will be the Sunday before Christmas. Everyone can plan ahead, and those dates should only change for something major, like a serious medical emergency. Mom's about to turn 90, and she may not have many more of these holidays left. Once she's gone, I honestly doubt we'll go to the trouble of doing holidays with my brother's clan again. It's just not worth the hassle. Story 23. Last Thanksgiving. We had it, for the 5th year in a row, at my aunt's house. She rents all new furniture right before the holiday to try to impress everyone. She acts like she bought it, but gets all passive-aggressive if you sit too hard on anything, because of course, she has to return it afterward. Her kids are always the reason we never eat on time. One has to wait on his ex to drop off his kid, and another is always off at a friend's house. The food's never right either. The ham and turkey are always cooked the day before and stored in the fridge, so by the time we eat, the meat's as cold as deli slices. Meanwhile, the vegetables are so hot they could melt the serving spoons. Last year, my grandmother begged me to come early, so I showed up at 12:30 because she swore we'd eat at 1. We finally sat down at 5:45. Never again. Now, my wife and I cook something just for ourselves and tell both sides of the family we're going to the other's house. It's so peaceful and relaxing. Honestly, the best Thanksgiving tradition we've ever started. Story 24. My parents live in a weird little village, and the first year my girlfriend and I visited, she had quite the experience. I left her at home with my mom and aunt while I went to visit my uncles on their farm, and she decided to go explore the village on her own. Things went downhill fast. The people at the only pub were rude to her. The woman who runs the only shop refused to sell her any food because your husband wouldn't want you snacking. And some random old woman called her a slut and warned, "People like you get what's coming to them round these parts." Naturally, she was terrified. She went back to my parents' house and told them what had happened, but instead of sympathizing, they took the villagers' side. They started criticizing her over all sorts of things, and even though my girlfriend's no shrinking violet, they really went after her. It got so uncomfortable that she decided to go out for another walk just to get some air. She headed up the path through the moor, and after a few miles, a man suddenly stepped out of the trees. He told her to be careful walking around and not to let anyone see her. Then, glancing around nervously, he darted back into the bushes. Oh, and he was covered in blood from the string of dead birds hanging around his neck. Strangely enough, she's not too keen on visiting my parents anymore. Story 25. My husband's mother is an odd duck. 2 years ago on Thanksgiving, it was a complete fiasco. We were using the fancy upstairs dining room, and when we got there, the only thing she'd set up was a punch bowl full of alcohol. Very little punch, mostly Everclear. There were 6 of us total, and only one was much of a drinker. She then cheerfully announced that the food was still cooking. Okay, fine. Then she told us she'd made something special for us to do while we waited. What she'd made was a YouTube playlist. It was an hour-long collection of random turkey and Thanksgiving-themed videos, some songs, some cartoons, a painfully awkward sorority music video, and even a couple of repeats, as if she'd just tossed in whatever popped up first. So we sat there, stone sober and starving, watching this bizarre playlist while my mother-in-law beamed proudly at her holiday entertainment. She also has a habit of disowning us every few months and going on emotional manipulation tirades, but honestly, I'd still take that over another holiday-themed YouTube playlist. Never again. Story 26. I still go home for the holidays, but every time I do, it gets harder to pack for that 4.5-hour drive. I'm the youngest in my family, 24, and moved away from my hometown, where about 98% of my family still lives, almost 3 years ago. It's a small town in North Carolina, and moving away completely changed my outlook on life. I switched careers, spend more time outdoors, and don't get caught up in the little day-to-day dramas that seem to run that small-town lifestyle. I study horticulture now and want to become self-sustainable. I've been off Facebook for 3 years and don't use social media at all. I also follow a low-carb, high-fat diet. All of that has created this wall between me and my family, to the point where it's hard to actually enjoy my time with them. Every conversation seems to start with, "Did you see that on Facebook?" Or, "I heard so-and-so's daughter got arrested again." Then come the comments like, "You can't eat this? It's corn. It's good for you." Or, "When are you getting married now that your brother's hitched?" Or, "You're sure you're eating?" And of course, "Come on, one cookie won't hurt." No one really wants to spend time with me anymore. It feels more like they're picking apart who I've become, looking for a flaw so they can feel better about their own choices. I used to think my family was close and loving, but now I realize a lot of that closeness was just control disguised as care. Getting older sucks. Story 27. Background. My wife and I are both transgender. We met while we were both transitioning. Before this particular incident, I'd always been careful during family get-togethers, and pretty much any other time, to keep my distance from my nieces and nephews. I had overheard a conversation once between my 2 alcoholic brothers-in-law and my brother, where they said they didn't want their kids around me because I might try to turn them gay or whatever. It really sucked because my nieces and nephews are genuinely great kids. But if parents don't want you around their children, you respect that, no matter how unfair or hurtful it feels. Years later, I met my wife and wanted to introduce her to my family. I thought, well, everyone else in the family brings new partners, friends, and co-workers to Christmas. I'll invite her too. So I sent a quick email to my sister, like everyone did when they wanted to invite someone. The reply came back, We don't want that at our little family celebration. The children would be embarrassed to go to school if they were exposed to that. What would S.L. think? I knew immediately that it was my mother speaking through my sister. Classic flying monkey behavior. I looked at that message and thought, WTF. It was obvious I wasn't really considered part of the family anymore, not if they didn't want that, meaning us being transgender, at their little family celebration. I've kept minimal contact since then, but I've never been to another family gathering, and I never will be. It's even in my will. I've requested no funeral. Story 28. Long story short, my narcissistic mom kicked me out of the house last Christmas after an argument that started because I forgot to bring a purse back from college for a road trip my parents had planned for the next day. That was the hill she chose to die on. Even after I apologized and offered to drive back to my apartment to get it, about 40 minutes each way, or to just detour the next morning since we'd be heading in the same general direction, she refused. I finally yelled that I didn't even want to go on the road trip anymore and that I'd head back to college in the morning instead. She yelled back, "Then just leave now." So I did. I waited until everyone was asleep, quietly packed up my pets and all my stuff. My dad would have tried to stop me, and drove all the way home that night. I still talk to my dad and sister, but I haven't seen my mom since that day, and I don't plan to anytime soon. It might sound petty from the outside, but after years of emotional and mental abuse all through high school and every college break, that moment was just the last straw. Story 29. This is my Why We No Longer Have Christmas with My Uncle story. 3 years ago, my brother came out to our family in stages, sharing the news as he felt comfortable. He told my mom, my fiancé, and me first, then later told our dad during a visit that same year. Everyone handled it far better than he expected, as you'd hope from normal people living in the 21st century. He was most nervous about telling our grandma, who works at and regularly attends church. You get the picture. But to his surprise, and no one else's, she took it well, saying she would love him no matter what. Fast forward to the next Christmas season. One day, while I was at work, my brother texted me to say that our uncle had asked him not to bring his boyfriend or his lifestyle to Christmas that year because he had young kids with impressionable minds. For context, this is the same uncle who was an alcoholic, used drugs, smoked around us, drove recklessly with us in the car, and had a new girlfriend nearly every week. He still does most of these things, even now, with 2 kids of his own. Those same young, impressionable minds. My brother, being the kind of person who avoids conflict, told me he was just going to do as my uncle asked and skip Christmas. I called nonsense on that and texted my uncle directly, confronting him about his message and asking where he got the idea that he could decide who was welcome at my grandma's house for Christmas. Fast forward again to Christmas Day. Everyone, including my brother and his boyfriend, but not my uncle, was already gathered at my grandma's for dinner. My uncle eventually showed up late as usual. His youngest ran into the living room, stopped short when he saw my brother and his boyfriend, gasped, and ran back to tell his mom that my brother was there. My memory of what happened next is a little fuzzy, but my uncle was furious. He stormed out, started packing up, and was clearly ready to leave. My mom called him out on his behavior. We had filled her in beforehand and more or less expected this to happen, and she laid out all the same points I mentioned earlier. We proceeded to have a good old-fashioned East Side blowout on Christmas morning. People yelling from front porches, slamming car doors, the whole scene. I kid you not, almost the same thing happened again on Easter that year. Not quite as bad, but still enough to make my brother, unfairly, feel awful. No one in my family has spoken more than 5 words to my uncle since, except my grandma, aside from when my grandpa was in the hospital a few months later. We've even had to change where we host holiday dinners because if it's at my grandma's, there's always the risk of my uncle showing up and causing another scene. My uncle is older than my brother and me by 9 and 11 years, respectively. Just to clarify the earlier part, we spent a lot of time with him growing up. He often babysat us and still lived with my grandma during those years. Story 30. It's not that I don't go home anymore. I just don't celebrate Christmas to the full extent. Growing up, my family constantly ignored me during the holidays and used the occasion to put me down. I never received gifts, while my siblings were showered with them. When I started working, my sister would go out and buy a ton of gifts, then tell me afterward that I owed her $2,000. Eventually, I decided to cancel Christmas on my end because I kept getting taken advantage of. Don't get me wrong, I loved giving gifts, but damn, it would have been nice to get just one good gift in return. I know it sounds like a first world problem, but one year I really wanted an iPad too. I never got anything for Christmas, so I figured why not throw that out there? That year, every single person in my family, except me, got an iPad too. I was completely blown away. I couldn't believe they'd go that far just to exclude me. Literally thousands of dollars spent, and not a single thought for me. When I was younger, I wanted an RC car. I was promised that car for almost an entire year, and I was so excited. But when Christmas came, I opened my present and found a t-shirt instead. That happened 3 years in a row. Every year I fell for it, hoping this would be the year I got the car. Meanwhile, my brother and sister were getting amazing gifts while I unwrapped another t-shirt. That kind of thing really hurts when you're a kid. Story 31. Growing up, my mother was an alcoholic. There were too many times when she would drive drunk with us kids in the car on the way to the bus stop, or she'd get paranoid and make us swear to pacts of secrecy. About what? I honestly couldn't tell you. Since she left my father and remarried, she's gotten better. There was a year or two when she and my stepdad drank more heavily, but after I told him about the time my mom got hold of one of his guns while drunk and waved it around during an argument with my sister, things changed. Now, they keep all the guns locked in his safe and have cut back their drinking to 2 or 3 cocktails, or 3 to 4 beers, a night. I can go home for the holidays for a single day, see everyone, and be fine. But I don't like spending the night because my mom still wants to party sometimes, like my sister and I used to. When my mom drinks, though, there always has to be someone to blame, someone to validate whatever she's feeling. Usually, it's my sister, because the two of them are so similar. I'm typically the one who steps in to calm them both down, to let them vent until the tears come and the apologies follow. But last Thanksgiving, I was her scapegoat. Watching her take another big sip of her drink and point her finger at me, that sharp, unsteady way only a drunk person can, hurt and terrified me. It brought back too many memories I've tried to leave behind. I don't want to go back to that part of my childhood. I don't want to see her become that person again, even if it only happens once in a great while. This Thanksgiving, my boyfriend is coming with me for the day. We're going to drive down, spend time with everyone, maybe have some edibles with my sister and possibly my mom or whoever else in the family wants to join, eat, joke around, play a drinking game or two, and then drive back home. It should be a fun day. Everyone will be there, including my grandparents and all the pets. I really do love my family, chaos and all, because they're amazing people. The only time I struggle is when my mom drinks a little too much. And by that, I mean more than a bottle of wine and a few cocktails in one night. Story 32. My sister literally ignores me all year until the holidays start approaching. Then, she suddenly blows up my phone nonstop, demanding to know my exact travel plans, the days I'll be there, the exact hour I'll arrive, and exactly when I plan to head home. After we've driven 8 hours with small kids, she's waiting at my mom's front door the moment we arrive, expecting us to be cheerful and ready to socialize. If we happen to be asleep because we drove through the night, we can hear her in the next room talking trash about us being deadheads and asking if we're planning to sleep the day away. This has happened as early as 8 in the morning, when we'd only gone to bed at 6. When we leave, she goes completely silent again until the next visit. She refuses to come see us because it's too long of a drive, and we're the ones who chose to move away. And if she ever does call or text about something important to her, and I don't immediately drop everything to respond, she complains that I'm rude and always ignoring her. For the record, she's not the baby of the family. I am. And she's in her 40s. Story 33. My mom was always the center of the family. She cooked for every holiday, and her meals brought everyone together. One year, just after Thanksgiving, she came down with what we thought was the stomach flu. I went back to school at the end of the weekend, not realizing how serious it really was. Fast forward a year of doctors, tests, and specialists, and we discovered that her stomach flu had actually been cancer. She passed away the day before Thanksgiving. After spending that year trying everything to save her and watching her slowly fade, I refused to let cancer take the holiday too. So I cooked a full turkey dinner with all the trimmings. That was 10 years ago, and it was the last turkey dinner I ever made. It was also the last time my dad, my brother, and I were together for a holiday. Life has moved on. I have a loving husband and a beautiful child, both of whom I wish my mom could have met, but I still can't bring myself to cook on Thanksgiving. Thankfully, honey-baked ham makes one heck of a turkey. Story 34. Last year, my family was deeply divided politically. My cousin and her father were the loudest and most hateful of the bunch. They were hosting Thanksgiving that year, and I declined the invitation because I didn't want to spend the day listening to them rant about how transgender people are ruining the world and whatever else they felt the need to shout about. My cousin texted me, promising there would be no political talk. As soon as she said that, I texted my mom to let her know I'd be coming after all. Immediately after I sent that message, my cousin followed up with, "But if you knew how the government worked, you wouldn't have voted the way you did. You should sit down with my dad so he can explain." Politics to you. I'm a grown woman, and hearing that was infuriating. She went on to say even more condescending things, and I finally told her I wouldn't be coming to Thanksgiving if I was going to be treated like a child. That's when she turned it around and accused me of being a terrible wife and mother for denying my family Thanksgiving, even though we already had 2 other celebrations planned. So I blocked her number and haven't spoken to her since. Story 35. A few years ago, my mom went to the hospital for depression right before Christmas. She flew my sister in from across the country to help out, and holy hell, that turned out to be a terrible decision. From the moment I picked her up at the airport, she was acting completely unhinged. Right off the bat, it was, "Did you hear Mom hit Peter?" She hadn't. Then, "We shouldn't celebrate Christmas this year. Everything is too messed up." I was like, nope, not doing this. She tried everything in her power to cancel Christmas over her own personal drama. She didn't even want us to have dinner. The final straw came when my brother got a bottle of vodka for Christmas, which he, like a normal adult, enjoyed that night. My sister freaked out about him drinking, poured out part of his cup, and kept making a scene. I figured whatever, she's being awful this year, but we'll get through it. Then the next day, she called me and said, "Are you okay?" I told her yes, of course, and asked why. She said, "Peter got really drunk and threw you through the door last night. You should see a doctor." I just sat there like, what? No, he absolutely did not. That's when I realized my sister was losing it. Sadly, we haven't talked about it since. Even worse, she's made some pretty serious accusations toward our dad, ones we're still trying to make sense of. It's all just messed up and honestly, really hard to deal with. In short, my sister tried to cancel Christmas because she was falling apart, and everything about that year was pure chaos. Story 36. I don't like my stepmom. My siblings too. Literally, everyone except my father thinks she's a vile person. She's an awful, flagrantly racist woman, which would be a different kind of problem if my dad hadn't had 4 kids with my very Puerto Rican mother. She said things like, all black people are crazy because their brains are fried from spending too long in the sun. Lost it for 5 straight minutes during a commercial for the Eric Andre show because non-white people were on TV, and generally spits hatred at any race that isn't white or East Asian, but only because she likes the look. One big reason I genuinely can't stand her is what she said to me when I was 17. This was early on when my borderline personality disorder was starting to show in ways that were hard to ignore. I had a panic attack during her younger son's birthday party, a party she'd insisted I attend even though I'd maybe interacted with him 4 times since she and my dad got together, and he's about 5 years older than me. I stayed upstairs, didn't leave my room, didn't make a scene or call my dad or anything that would interrupt the party. But that apparently offended her like nothing else. The next day, she had to drive me to school, a half-hour drive that she spent tearing me apart. She told me what an awful, selfish person I was, that I was nothing like my father, that I was useless, a burden, and that I was killing him. By the time we got to school, I was crying so hard my shop teacher, bless him, Mr. Burns, sent me straight to the counselor. The counselor recommended I go to a psychiatric hospital the next day. Guess who had to drive me there? And before anyone blames my dad, he was out of state for work and couldn't do it. She spent the first half of my intake appointment refusing to help me fill out the forms she was legally supposed to complete as my guardian. When the hospital determined I was a danger to myself and needed to be admitted, she called one of her friends and complained about how I was wasting her time, whining that she wasn't there for her kids because they would never do this to her. Real supportive, right? That was one of the worst things she's ever done to me. and that's saying something. Story 37. A few years ago, my mom and stepdad stopped celebrating or decorating for Christmas. I made the mistake of going home that year, and it was the most depressing Christmas ever. There were no decorations, no gifts, no family meal, just let's sit down and read the Christmas story from the Bible and have a fit if you dare suggest it didn't occur exactly on December 25th. I haven't been back to their house for Christmas since. For a few years, I went to my brother's because my other siblings would gather there, but lately I've begged off for health reasons. It's a more than 2-hour drive over a rough mountain pass, only to stay in a house where they chain smoke indoors and their pets have accidents wherever they please. Now that my mom's birthday no longer falls on Thanksgiving weekend because of the calendar shift, I don't travel for that either. My dad lives at the far end of a ferry route and along 2-lane country roads, which means the 50-mile trip can take anywhere from 3 to 6 hours one way on holiday weekends. These days, I tell my family I don't travel for the holidays due to weather and traffic. Instead, I stay home, make myself favorite meals, listen to Christmas carols, and enjoy some peace and quiet. Story 38. One Thanksgiving, while I was still in high school, my mother punched me in the face. I had called her out on a lot of things she'd done, and she didn't like how the truth made her look. My dad's side of the family finally believed me that she was abusing me, but they took no steps to help. It took them 3 years to believe me, not even after she got physically aggressive with me in front of the entire family for getting a B in math. My mother's side of the family is one big mess. My grandmother abused me too, and every Christmas they all pretend to get along. It usually ends either in sharp, passive-aggressive comments or one big family fight. My aunt and mother take turns hosting the so-called family Christmas party. When I finally had a place of my own, I wanted to host in good faith. Bad idea. My grandmother threw a fit saying I lived too far away. This despite the fact that we travel from Maine to New Hampshire every other year. My aunt lives 3 hours from my grandmother. I lived 6 hours from my aunt. Yet if I declined to go to New Hampshire, I was the bad guy. My aunt and step-grandfather, who's a Jehovah's Witness and doesn't even celebrate, made the trip. My grandmother, meanwhile, was in Connecticut for a dog show. Then there's the part of the family my grandmother essentially disowned. My biological grandfather was a PDF file with his own daughter, leaving her pregnant. Because of that, my cousin, my uncle, and that side of the family were all cast out. I can only say that I hope my grandfather rots in hell, and that my grandmother faces her own reckoning someday. My family is terrible, and that's not even getting into the extended family on my father's side. Story 39. 'Twas the night before Christmas. I was living at home with my parents while finishing my master's degree. The house was decorated, presents were wrapped, the Christmas station played on the radio, and cookies were coming out of the oven. I was chatting with a friend on Skype, home alone while my parents and sister were at work. Everything was calm and normal. Until my mother burst through the door around 4:15, ranting and raving that she was about to ruin Christmas. Away to the closet, she flew like a flash, grabbing a suitcase to fill with my father's clothes in a rash. She stuffed it full with grimace and glare, declaring, "That man will not spend Christmas in this house, I swear." I stood in the doorway of my bedroom in shock as she tossed the suitcase outside and worked to change the lock. I asked if she was sure that was what she wanted to do, and she snapped back, "You'd better go for a while too." Donning my winter coat, I stepped out into the cold, muttering a few curses if the truth be told. And at this point, I'm done rhyming because the memory still pisses me off too much to have any fun with it. I walked outside and saw my younger sister. I grabbed her and told her what was happening, that Mom was throwing Dad out of the house, and we shouldn't be there for a while because he was about to come home to a complete mess. My father was no saint. He'd been cheating on my mother with a woman only slightly older than me, but it's hard to hold a grudge against one of them when both of them managed to ruin Christmas. They fought. We walked around the neighborhood for a couple of hours, then went back and were sat down to be told they'd finally decided to get a divorce. My sister and I were furious and told them it was about time, but we were also angry about their choice of timing. Then we all tried to go through the motions of our usual Christmas Eve traditions as if nothing was wrong, until Mom went upstairs and started crying, hard, for hours. My father tried to apologize to my sister and me. I laughed in his face and stormed out. I came back a while later. The next morning, I woke up to a broken family still trying to pretend it wasn't being held together by anything more than make-believe. We had breakfast together, opened presents together, and watched both my parents break down crying when they opened their big gifts to each other. Dad got tickets for a NASCAR race. Later that summer, he gave them to me for my birthday, like it was some great gesture. It was nice to spend some time away with Mom, but still, pretty lousy gift, all things considered. These days, my parents are both much happier, and my relationship with each of them has grown now that several years have passed. But I don't visit on Christmas. Story 40. I went out of the country on business for a few months and made arrangements with my mother to care for my daughter while I was away, fully intending to return. While I was gone, she completely cut off contact between us and applied for guardianship, claiming that I had abandoned my daughter. She has a long history of interfering in people's lives to make herself look like a hero, especially if she can make someone else appear to be the villain at the same time. I just never thought she'd take it this far, but I should have known better. The guardianship was granted because she told the court I was unreachable. I wasn't. She simply refused to answer my calls and messages. They live in a very rural area, but I went to court to fight for my daughter. I brought witnesses, my mother's sister, my boss, and my daughter's paternal aunt. I also brought more than 60 pages of documentation showing the truth of the situation. But the judge and my mother's lawyer were related by marriage. My own lawyer dragged out the proceedings just to get paid twice, and since the area is so remote, there were no other lawyers nearby to take my case. So I lost everything. Even after I went back to court to report that my mother had violated visitation orders, the judge ignored my request to hold her in contempt. So now she has my daughter, and I have no family. This will be my second year alone for the holidays. Story 41. I'm not sure what I'll do this Christmas. My last one would have been good if my step-aunt hadn't ruined it for me. Everything was going well until Christmas morning when we started opening presents. In previous years, my step-aunt and uncle, along with my other uncle on my mom's side, would team up to buy gifts for each of us kids. It worked well. They usually picked out great presents since they pooled their money together. We'd, of course, gift each of them in return. Even though all three of their names were always on the card, it was understood that my step-aunt was the one who organized everything. Well, lo and behold, that Christmas morning my cousins and sister were unwrapping big, fancy electronic gifts from my step-aunt and the two uncles. I looked around for mine and realized I couldn't find it anywhere. I figured it must have been forgotten. Maybe they didn't realize they'd left it behind. So I went and asked her, casually. Maybe it was presumptuous, but for 21 years, I'd always received something. She looked me right in the eye and told me I wasn't getting anything from them that year, because I was too old for presents. I had just turned 22. She said it was getting ridiculous to keep buying things for me at that point. I was completely floored. It wasn't even about the gift itself. I honestly didn't care what it was. It was the way she singled me out that hurt. Everyone else in the family still got presents from her. She tried to make it sound like money was the issue, but that same Christmas, she gave my grandmother a brand new iPad. And it's not like she or my uncle were struggling. They didn't have kids of their own and both had good, steady jobs. If she had explained it to me beforehand, or if there had always been a clear rule about a cutoff age for gifts, I would have been completely fine with that. I'm an adult. I don't need or even want material things anymore. Unless it's something practical, it just ends up as clutter. What really hurt was the way she handled it, catching me off guard on Christmas Day, singling me out in front of everyone, and leaving me feeling excluded from the goodwill. I spent the rest of the day fighting back tears. I'd had a horrible, stressful year, filled with anxiety and an abusive job that had left me drained, and I'd been looking forward to Christmas as a rare chance to relax and feel happy again. Instead, I ended up feeling like I wasn't worth spending money on. My mom was furious when I told her. She's never really gotten along with my step-aunt, and this definitely didn't help. She didn't confront her, but she did say we should host Christmas at our place this year and not invite them. There have been other issues with them over the years that I was mostly shielded from, but I've learned more about as I've gotten older. Now that Christmas is coming around again, it seems like my family has forgotten the whole thing, but I haven't. I still remember how humiliated I felt. If we do end up celebrating there again, I'll go. But I won't be bringing her a gift, and I don't want anything from her either. This time, though, I feel more prepared, stronger. Story 42. I don't spend Christmas with my mother anymore because when I was between the ages of 15 and 17, my parents were going through a nasty divorce. I spent Christmas Eve and morning with my father, then went to my mom's side of the family for Christmas dinner. She was so upset that I had spent half the day with my dad that she didn't sit or speak to me during dinner. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed in the room we shared, she was typing on her computer, still silent. I asked her to be a little quieter because I was trying to sleep, and she suddenly exploded at me. It ended with her telling me I had ruined Christmas and my grandpa driving me out to meet my dad at 1 in the morning. I'll always be grateful to my grandfather for taking me out of that horrible situation. Edit. My mom and I have always had a rocky relationship, and I've always been closer to my father. I'm 22 now and have been living on my own since I was 18, after another blow-up with my mother for the same reasons. My parents are still in the process of getting divorced. My mother is extremely narcissistic, and it took me a long time to realize that just because she's my mom doesn't mean she isn't toxic to my well-being. This whole thread reminds me of a quote by Danielle Kopka. Not all toxic people are cruel and uncaring. Some of them love us dearly. Many of them have good intentions. Most are toxic to our being simply because their needs and way of existing in the world force us to compromise ourselves and our happiness. They aren't inherently bad people, but they aren't the right people for us. And as hard as it is, we have to let them go. Life is hard enough without being around people who bring you down. And as much as you care, you can't destroy yourself for the sake of someone else. You have to make your well-being a priority, whether that means breaking up with someone you care about, loving a family member from a distance, letting go of a friend, or removing yourself from a situation that feels painful. You have every right to leave and create a safer space for yourself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.